This is my story of Gaza. He stands amidst the skeletal remains of a grand ancient building. My daughter, Meervat, she was 12. She used to ask me what sound history makes. I told her it was the whisper of the wind through these arches. Now, there are no arches left to whisper. Only the wind. They say over 70% of this place, the Pasha Palace, is destroyed. But this one stone, this piece she loved to trace with her finger, this is not 70% gone. It's a story of what is lost when thousands of years of civilization are turned to rubble, and what endures when people refuse to let their hope be buried with it. It's a story written not in reports, but in the quiet acts of survival, in the faces of a people caught between a buried ancient history and a desperate fight for their future. Since October 2023, the scale of loss has been almost incomprehensible. By late 2025, reports from the Gaza Health Ministry indicated that more than 71,000 Palestinians had been killed and over 171,000 injured. Some academic studies suggest the actual number of fatalities may be significantly higher. The numbers are staggering, but they can also be numbing. They risk obscuring the individual lives, the personal histories, and the universal dreams that have been shattered. What happens when the world's attention, fixed so intensely by the violence, begins to drift away? Temporary pauses in fighting have brought surges of humanitarian aid and brief respites from the worst of the bombing. Gaza isn't just a strip of land, it's a crossroads of civilizations. For 5 millennia, it has been a strategic heartland, a flourishing port where empires, ideas, and cultures met. Its story is layered in the very soil. Canaanite, Philistine, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic. Imagine standing before the great Omari Mosque, its foundations telling the story of a 5th century Byzantine church, its towering minaret a landmark for centuries. Or walking the grounds of the Anthedon harbor, a port from the Hellenistic era, where goods and dreams were once traded across the Mediterranean. These weren't just monuments, they were living archives, vessels of faith and tradition. But the bombing campaign has been described as one of the most destructive in recent history. By January 2026, UNESCO had verified damage to 150 culturally significant sites. The Great Omari Mosque was severely hit. Much of the structure collapsed with its minaret partially destroyed. The ancient port of Anthedon was completely destroyed. The Pasha's palace, a medieval fortress turned museum, was left in ruins. Of the more than 17,000 artifacts it once held, spanning from the Bronze Age to the Islamic period, only a handful had been recovered from the rubble by late 2025. This is not just collateral damage, it's the erasure of collective memory. Palestinian historian Ayman al-Balbisi calls it an attempt to erase Gaza's historical identity. When these ancient layers are bulldozed, the archaeological context, and with it, historical knowledge, is irretrievably lost. His work is a quiet act of defiance. It's a declaration that while buildings can be destroyed, heritage, the soul of a people, is carried within those who remember it. He didn't flee south when the war began, staying with his family nearby. when an explosion tore their world apart. His family was pulled from the rubble, injured but alive. All except his 12-year-old daughter, Meervat. Now, he returns to the wreckage, along with a small team supported by cultural preservation organizations. He is engaged in the painstaking work of clearing rubble by hand. They stack stones to be reused, sorting through the debris of what was once, in his words, a small paradise on earth. The challenge is immense. Restoration materials are scarce, their entry into Gaza heavily restricted. For now, the work is about salvage. It's about saving the fragments. They destroyed the stone, but they cannot destroy the story, Hammuda says. Every piece we save is a word in that story. I will spend my life rebuilding it for Meervat and for all the children who need to know where they come from. For Fatima's children, this means a diet that consists mostly of bread and whatever is available from aid packages. Meet Fatima, a mother of 4. Before the war, her mornings were a familiar chaos of getting children ready for school. Today, her morning begins before sunrise with a different ritual, the quest for water. Nearly the entire population of Gaza is exposed to public health risks from extensive damage to water and sanitation infrastructure. There is no reliable source of clean water, a crisis that fuels infectious diseases like diarrhea and hepatitis, which run rampant in overcrowded shelters. Fatima spends hours each day queuing, hoping to fill a few containers with water that she knows is likely not safe, but is all they have. Food is the next battle. In August 2025, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification confirmed that famine was occurring in the Gaza Governorate. While increased aid has since alleviated the worst conditions in some areas, the situation remains perilously fragile. Around 1.6 million people are still expected to face high levels of acute food insecurity through mid-April 2026. He finishes his shift, walks past the makeshift morgue, and prepares to do it all again. His work is not just about medicine. It is an act of bearing witness, of holding on to human dignity in the face of absolute despair. Fatima watches her youngest for signs of weakness, for the lethargy that signals the body is consuming itself. The joy of watching her children grow is overshadowed by the constant gnawing fear that they are wasting away. Her home is now a corner of a classroom in a UN-run school, shared with 3 other families. Across Gaza, families huddle in makeshift tents or damaged buildings, exposed to the cold. The harsh winter conditions have had a deadly impact, with reports of children dying from hypothermia. Now, let's turn to Dr. Yousef. He's a physician at one of Gaza's few partially functional hospitals. As of early 2026, no hospital in the Gaza Strip is fully functional. Only about half of the 36 hospitals are partially operational, and they are overwhelmed, operating far beyond their capacity. The corridors are filled with patients on mattresses, the air thick with suffering. His day is a relentless triage. Who can be saved? Who has to wait? The hospital faces a severe shortage of everything: beds, medicine, fuel, and specialized equipment like ventilators and incubators, which are often restricted from entry. He has seen preterm births skyrocket as maternal malnutrition and chronic stress take their toll, with roughly 1 in 5 newborns requiring intensive care that is simply not available. More than 1,700 of Dr. Yousef's colleagues, doctors, nurses, paramedics, have been killed since the conflict began. Each loss is a blow to an already decimated system. Without it, the cycle of crisis and temporary relief is doomed to repeat, with each turn of the wheel grinding away more lives, more history, and more hope. This aid is a lifeline. It has at times pushed back the famine conditions that have gripped parts of Gaza. But this progress rests on perilously fragile ground. Sporadic violence continues even during announced ceasefires, with reports of hundreds of casualties during such periods. For families who had begun to return to their homes, military incursions have forced them to flee yet again, becoming displaced for the 5th or 6th time. The humanitarian gains are constantly at risk. While some aid gets in, predictable and unimpeded access remains a major obstacle. Convoys are frequently impeded or denied, and aid workers navigate damaged roads and persistent insecurity. A staggering number of people still face crisis levels of hunger, and the winter has been brutal for families in flimsy tents or damaged structures. The health system remains on the brink of collapse, with shortages of everything from dialysis medication to surgical supplies. The needs are astronomical. For 2025, the UN and its partners appealed for $4 billion to address the most critical needs in Gaza and the West Bank. But sustaining funding is a constant struggle. The question is, are we still listening? It's in these small personal acts of remembrance and resistance that the true story of Gaza is found. The story of Hammuda, trying to piece together a history for a daughter he can no longer hold. The story of Fatima, whose daily quest for water is a fight for her children's future. And Erasure, the story of Dr. Yousef, who battles to save lives within a healthcare system that has been systematically dismantled. The headlines will fade. The news cycle will move on. But for the people of Gaza, the struggle does not. Their lives are suspended between a past that has been pulverized and a future that remains agonizingly out of reach. They aren't asking for miracles. They're asking for the things many of us take for granted: safety, dignity, the chance to rebuild, the right to dream, to understand more about the humanitarian efforts on the ground and the organizations working to provide aid and preserve Gaza's heritage. We have included links in the description below. Sharing this video helps keep the world's attention on the stories that need to be told and the future that is yet to be written.